High courts are entertaining it. In certain cases, high courts are saying no, sorry, put it in the call book, go back to the remedy. There is no clarity on what is the position in law. At least there has to be some way forward. Another big problem which I think Vineet and I were discussing in the morning were state members. And state member need to be transferred with one bad state member bench. You're stuck with it. So, how do you come out of that situation? And what will happen is you will then start strategizing on which state is good for me to file matter. And that is how, why can't a state member be transferred from one state to another? Let them have an exposure across India. So good thing, judicial technical, there is a balance. There are certain issues in terms of referral, third member, now
of cases before High Court or even cases which are waiting to go before the tribunal. Now, do you think it's maybe a good idea that there is an amnesty scheme which is introduced prior to the setting of a tribunal so that companies who want to sort of settle the issues and not really litigate can do that, and in that sense the pendency might come down? We recently saw that under the FTP there was an amnesty for EPCG and advance authorization, as also under GST for registration cancellations there was an amnesty, and they gave a window till 30th of June to sort of file for revocation of the suspension or of the GST registration. So in that context, do you think it might be worthwhile to explore a scheme where some issues at least can be settled by way of amnesty and then rest can go before the tribunal?
See, so given that there have been amnesty schemes in this country, and when we talk about GST, which is a law which is evolving, and maybe on many issues there is clarity which has built over a period of time. Okay, and initially for 2 or 3 years, basically there was a lot of confusion also amongst the authorities, amongst the assessors. Probably there are bona fide mistakes. I'm saying it's not the positions which have been taken, but bona fide mistakes. I mean, I'm aware of many cases where the returns could not have been filed in first 3 or 4 months. People approached because that transition window was not open and that it got closed, or somebody could not apply in time. There are hundreds of reasons for that. Okay, and people are still struggling at multiple levels, and so it's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea, and Sanjay sir is right now here, so that's why I can take liberty. It's not a bad idea, tribunal or no tribunal. It's not a bad idea that when we are celebrating 6th year, after 6 years, that to clear up this kind of things. See, those who want to litigate will continue to litigate. Those who have taken positions, whether it's a government position or it's a private position, but there are hundreds and thousands of those small taxpayers who have committed certain mistakes or situational problems. Probably it's a good, and they want to pay tax. They are just worried about those penalties and interest. At least those can be spared off, or because it will be a good revenue for the department, and certainly there will be less burden on various commissionerates and various tribunals whenever they come up. Because tribunals, as of now, they have to be formed, and then it will take for them also time to settle. And by that time, the kind of audits which are happening now, actually the cases will rise exponentially going from here. So at least for till now, it is more of less litigation for. I know when people forgot to file return, there is a litigation, and now there are a new set of litigation. People forgot to file appeal within time. There are small people. And since their commissioners appeal or the state joint commissioners appeal, they do not have authority to condone those delays, and that's why they are just rejecting summarily. And those people are just paying 20%. State government is authorizing, नहीं आपका stay हो गया है, अब tribunal बनने तक wait कीजिए. I know 5 or 6 such people. So those things can be sorted out maybe. So it was a humble request that yes, that kind of amnesty scheme should come, so that once for all this initial problem or hiccups can be cleaned.
Your take on this?
No, I think echo what Vineet said. I have nothing more to add. I think all the points are completely valid and acceptable. There are far too many of those scenarios, at least in the maybe we have a cutoff in 2020, because I think by that time the law, at least the kind of aspects of issues that you were alluding to, by that time people should have known. So maybe we don't do it till the last financial year, maybe we sort of do a cutoff early. But as a concept, for sure, I think amnesty is required, because coming back to the tribunal, what happens if we don't have an amnesty? We are already in the 6th year of GST. Look at how a SESTAT is functioning. Today, if you go to any of the benches, I think appeals of 8 or 9 years previous financial year are being taken up. And that sort of a delay, I mean, in a kind of a economy that India aspires to be, I don't think it's keeping pace. So when we are, let's assume the tribunals come into force from January of 24, we already have that much of backlog. So we are straight away, by the time we are in, say, 1 year from now, by the time we're celebrating 7th year of GST, we have 6 years of pendency. So anyone filing an appeal in 2024 will not have any resolution before 2030. I mean, that will just not work. I mean, the whole point of a good and simple tax, I think the simplicity would be completely gone from that perspective. And I think connected point, since we just spoke about the tribunal, and since I have the benefit of your presence, sir, what I don't understand is why for members, lawyers with 10 years experience, who were allowed to be members of SESTAT, why is that category being excluded? And I don't ask because Rajat and I are lawyers. I mean, generally speaking, if you look at what are the eligible categories for the judicial member, one is a High Court judge, second is someone who has a 10-year, I mean, district judge, additional district judge who has a 10 years experience. I don't think there are too many High Court judges who will be interested in this, but let's assume there are a few. But I mean, when we are talking about the other two categories, very unlikely they would have had any exposure to GST. I mean, comparatively speaking, SESTAT I think would qualify as one of the better functioning tribunals. For all the complaints that we might have, on an average, I think it's one of the better functioning. Why don't we replicate what has worked and try and improve upon it? If you look at the VAT tribunals, there are so many times the bar associations in states have had to approach the High Court in that state, where the courts have had to intervene, saying that no, you appoint members, no, you have to function more than 2 hours a day, because even that at times was not happening. So we don't want that, right? I mean, I'm not saying let's start with perfection, but let's start somewhere where we will not get stuck immediately after starting.
Effective rate is in some instances a lot more higher. Let me again give you an example which relates to all of us, which is legal services, law firm. We are under reverse charge for ages. Everybody intending to hint that we don't comply with law, or we cannot comply with law. See the fungibility which is getting blocked. Why do we need it under reverse charge? Let lawyers be under reverse charge individual, but remove law firms out of reverse. I think the fungibility is a larger issue than rate rationalization. If that can be addressed, I think your rate would actually be far more better.
Yes, I think that's a very interesting point to make, Ritesh, because whenever somebody is on the reverse charge, obviously the credits gets blocked, and then eventually it leads to a rise in the cost of the services. So, Vineet, what are your views on rate rationalization?
Process, and it should continue because we are a diverse country. We have a large plethora. I mean, there are different issues or different reasons for rate rationalization at some point of time, and of course. Other than consumer behavior, the government also wants to direct particular economy in a particular fashion, and it can be done through rates and taxation only. Okay, earlier income tax used to be a tool for that. Now probably GST is a better tool. Okay, I would say, because income tax has become like administration for all social activities, industrialization, everything, all the Chapter 6 deductions or Chapter 6 deductions. Now GST is the way. And why we say now is the day? Because we have crossed 1.6 lakh crores. Why not we wait for 2 lakh crores? And what was wrong with 1 lakh crores? Nothing. So it's not the case. I mean, I would say when the government is comfortable with the finances and the kind of massive capex plans it has, it needs funds. So I would not say no, because you have now started achieving 1.6 lakh crores, so give me money or give me some relaxation of some taxes. Yes, it's a dynamic process, and if any target is to be made, I would request that services now should be addressed, because pre-GST services were taxed at 15%, and it's, I think, only sector which has gone up, probably because it was to be kept at par because it was not subject to VAT. But now there may be some scope for services to start thinking.
So we have had a lot of discussion around sustainable development and sustainable growth, and being conscious about the environment. And then we have some rulings which say that you can't take credit on CSR spends. Now, how do you marry these two thought processes? And we have the
So if you
benefit of
remember
Mr. Mangal.
last year we had a discussion on that.
We have the benefit of Mr.
No,
Mangal.
fundamental question remains why there should be a denial for input credit. Because CSR by definition is there are two kinds of CSR expense. One is which is under Companies Act Section 135, which is specifically being denied in income tax, and since it's being denied in income tax, GST also says since it's being denied there. But our fundamental question remains when by force of law if you are asking a corporate to spend money, why it should not be treated as business expenditure? And if it is business expenditure, why it should not be allowed as input credit? Okay. Second one is voluntary CSR, which government of the day or even government of the day, it's like environment of the day requires corporates or businesses to incur those kind of expenses. And if they are incurring them, if this is real-time expenditure, why not allow at least facilitate them? So I'm not restricting myself to CSR again. I'm saying why even restrict any other expense, be it employee insurance or those kind of things, or maybe 13-seater vehicle or 12-seater vehicle, which was a discussion in the morning. I mean, who will keep record of that? Maybe government has something in mind that okay, we want to promote larger vehicles or smaller vehicles. So probably the better way is to increase GST rather than denying credit, because it again requires a lot of manpower, a lot of this, that, a lot of decision making, which is against the very concept of automation in the GST or seamless credit. Probably this can be better administered by tinkering with rates here and there. So that
This can be waived in that. I believe a lot of litigations can go there. So if let us say it's not a revenue neutral transaction, interest is an opportunity cost for the government also. Probably MST might not cover those cases, but wherein ITC was fully allowed. And we have seen this concept for related parties also. That might be a good starting point for MST and for a lot of litigations to squeeze it.
Because I'm very confused about this ITC on CSR. See, CSR expenditure is an appropriation to P&L. Now, if you claim the ITC, it becomes a balance sheet item. So what you're saying is, take the ITC on CSR, incur more CSR, because let's say 1,000 rupees is my net profit, 2% is 20 rupees. So should I incur 20 inclusive of ITC? If I take ITC, that becomes less CSR, because that is appropriation to profit. So if I incur 20 plus GST, then what you are saying is incur more CSR. So I personally believe that this is very confusing to suggest take ITC on CSR, because then you are asking the companies to incur more on CSR. Yeah. Just if somebody can clarify.
yes, you are becoming hyper technical. Okay, my simple answer is that. The answer which we normally listen. Okay, I can give you. This is only a measure. 2% is only a measure under the Companies Act that how to calculate your CSR spend. That is not a benchmark. Okay, and capital goods, you get credit, right? So it can be clarified that your CSR expenses of 2% will be of your net profit or your gross profit, whatever it is. But at least allow those credits to be passed on. Allow that to be a deduction. It's only a measure that out of your profit, 2% should be spent. Okay, but why should it not be allowed as an expenditure? It doesn't say post-tax profit or pre-tax profit. Okay, so that measurements can be changed. Let's not be hyper-technical on all that.
And when an amount goes towards GST, your actual CSR spend reduces. It goes down. It doesn't go up.
Right. Okay, so I think with that we'll close this session. Thank you very much, Mr. Arun.
Slide so that everybody has the benefit of it. So, section 13 has a specific provision for determining the place of supply for intermediary services, and it is defined to mean the location of the intermediary. Now, this is clearly a diversion insofar as the default rule for determining place of supply is concerned, which was the location of the recipient. Then section 7 and 8, which kind of get into determining whether the supply is interstate or interstate. And if you look at the interplay between the two sections, in the case of an intermediary service, even if it is provided from India to a person outside India, the supply ends up becoming an intrastate supply due to the interplay between section 13(8)(b) and section 8 subsection 2 of IGST Act. Now that is a very complex situation that is giving rise to a lot of difficulties. Of course, I mean, a direct impact of the manner in which the place of supply is defined means that these services would not or typically should not qualify as exports, and possibly that is the intention. But even on the situations where the intermediary is sitting outside of India and customer is sitting inside of India, while it would not qualify as imports, the manner in which the reverse charge notification is worded creates an impression that such services would be taxable nevertheless. Though there are certain advanced rulings which are there to say that once the place of supply is outside of India, there cannot be a tax. But if you look at the RCM notification, it simply says that when the supplier is outside India and recipient is in India, you have to pay reverse charge GST. So that in itself is becoming an issue, and there are certain interesting aspects of law which are given rise to. There is a litigation, there are litigation which are happening on this, and there was a recent High Court judgment in a matter of Dharmendra and Jani, where Bombay High Court dwelled into some of these issues. So, couple of issues which are coming up here is whether these should be interstate supplies or intrastate supplies, for the fact that it is being provided to somebody outside of India. And now, if you look at the scheme of law, if you are in two different states, it becomes an interstate supply. Now here, recipient is outside of India, but it is still becoming an intrastate supply, which is kind of creating an anomaly. Whether the states have power to levy GST, because if it is an intrastate supply, it would be subjected to CGST or the relevant state GST. Whether the states have powers to levy GST, and whether such services should qualify as exports. Now, in that context, there was a parliamentary committee report which was also tabled, which mentioned that these services should be accorded the export status and zero rating benefit should be given to it. On the reverse charge side, I have already covered the points. I would go to the panel. So the easier part is that I can deflect the tougher part of the discussion to my co-panelists. So I have to start with Deepak. It benefits all of us, the lawyers, practitioners, consultants. But what is the real intention? Of course, I mean.
So, in my view, and again, this is one part of the legislature which has been, I'll say, very technically worded. So, you have section 8, which says subject to section 12, which indicates that probably under section 13, any provision comes, it would only levy IGST. And there has been a discussions on them. So, when Gujarat High Court affirmed the validity, it indicated it would be CGST and SGST. Mohit Mindel's Gujarat High Court, when it was discussing, it indicated that IGST can only be levied on these transactions, while it was discussing ocean freight. So advanced rulings are on both sides, on CGST, SGST and IGST. So with compensation to states getting over after these 5 years, I also foresee that in coming years there will be also a lot of disputes on whether a transaction is intrastate or interstate, because it would affect the revenue of the states. As a taxpayer, it might not impact me that I would have to pay the same tax. But because the revenue would go to different governments, there might be disputes inter-governments or vis-a-vis a particular authority saying that it does not attract IGST, it attracts CGST and SGST. So all these disputes are bound to happen. So in my limited knowledge, and Sanjay sir to clarify, it should levy IGST. But one last, I'll say, a request or a point in this regard is, as government has been issuing so many clarifications stating on multiple issues, and there are issues we'll be discussing later that there have been either clarifications or something on that respect, even on these place of supply provisions. And not taxpayers do not later face the doubt of, let us say, paying the wrong tax and then claiming refund and then getting refund, all these points. So that would also be a very welcome move and very appreciated.
And considering APO, BPO and the mindset with which the administration officers are working, the moment there are three parties involved in any transaction, the first and the foremost question comes whether you are intermediary or not. There has been a circular which bit of clarify this situation, but that circular needs further update in terms of the evolution that has been happening, in terms of the update which has been happening, and the way the industry is functioning. That is very well needed, sir. if we see in terms of the judiciary, whether we talk about Dharmendra Jani or the Gujarat High Court judgment or others, where the constitutional validity has been upheld, but there has been certain aspects which have been dealt in a manner which creates a problem. And if we see that the way the judgment has been worded, if particularly we talk about Bombay High Court judgment, which we are all referring to, it has typically constituted this transaction. It's a marketing sort of services which the petitioner was providing. They are typically classified into as export of services, and they have not appreciated while classifying into export of services the provision of Rule 2.6 and the export 5 condition, where one of the condition is that the location of the supplier has to be outside India, and in the intermediary services the location is coming within India. With it, the interplay between the 8.2 and the 7.5c, which we have seen in the preceding slide, the 8.2 classify and with 13 subsection 8 clause B of the intermediary, which talks about the intrastate supply, and 7.5pc is PC, which talks about the residuary rule. According to my view, it should clearly fall under 7.5c and IGST should be applicable. And most of the people sitting in this house, to my knowledge, we are all depositing IGST, and that is somehow the judgment is also towards the end. They have said the same. The states cannot levy tax on the place of supply which is under the interstate, because the parliament has given the power. Parliament has the power to enact that, and state does not have. And the transaction which is inter cannot be measured as intra by the state, and accordingly Maharashtra tax and the central tax cannot be levied on the same.
So Manish, when GST got implemented in 2017, so one of the main idea behind GST implementation is to remove the cascading effects of the taxation. There were cascading effect of taxation, like no ITC was allowed on 2% CST, 2% or 3 or 4%.